Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Astropad Studio and Direct Mail. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm all right. We're both home, which I don't know if I could say we're recovered from WWC yet, but we are at least home, right?
We are. Well, I'm at my beach house, so it's technically I'm home in Italy.
It's close. I was going to say close enough.
Yeah, close enough. Still recovering from WWDC sickness, which always happens. The more you try to prevent it, the worse it gets, it seems. So next year I'll just, whatever with the vitamins, whatever with all the precautions, come at me, viruses, because it appears that my strategy this year did not work.
I managed to get a little sick on the way into WWC, which was even more fun because during WWC.
That's not supposed to happen. That's not the way that it works. You're supposed to get sick after.
No.
Anyway, let me ask you, do you have any betas installed at this point?
So I do. I have a couple of betas. I've got iOS 13 on 2 devices. I've got it on an iPod Touch, which I bought just for that purpose, and on an iPad mini. And then I have macOS Catalina on an external SSD drive that I have connected to my MacBook Pro. So nice thing about that in particular with the SSD is I can move that between computers. I haven't tried it on my Mac Mini yet. I just installed it a couple of nights ago. But, so far so good. There are a lot of weird behaviors, but I think both of these betas are quite buggy at this point. So I wouldn't recommend putting it on your main machine if you can avoid it. But if you have a spare device lying around, it's fun to check out these early changes.
Yeah. In fact, I have a few devices around, but I, despite the fact that I could use my testing devices, I installed iPadOS on my main iPad Pro and iOS 13 on my main iPhone. But I gotta do that, right? I need to be able to test the software early and take notes as soon as possible, because in just about a couple of weeks, 3 weeks at the latest, I'll start writing my annual review. So I need to be able to test these betas super, super early, which is the reason why I put it on my main devices. Don't do like me. Please follow John's advice. But still, we thought that during the summer, this show been App Stories, and there's a bunch of new apps in iOS 13 and macOS Catalina. We like to take a look at these new apps, talk about some of the new features, maybe bring up some ideas while there's still time for some improvements. And we thought we'd start with Notes. Notes is, I guess I'm using it as my primary note-taking app these days. I don't know about you, John. I guess you are as well. You use Notes a bunch?
I had slowed down my use of Notes quite a bit, although this beta is bringing me back to it already because, we'll talk about all the new features, but I think it's to the point now where I really can use it as my primary note-taking app. So I'm trying to do that right now with iOS 13.
Got it. So while Notes didn't get the same major redesign that Reminders got, for example, it has a variety of substantial new features that really do improve how you can manage notes and how you can search your notes and share your notes with other people. So I'd like to start by talking about the organization of your notes. The primary feature that Apple introduced in iOS 13 on this front is subfolders. So you can finally, and this was possible on macOS before, but in iOS you can now finally nest folders and create subfolders. It used to be that you could manage your notes using subfolders, but you had to create those subfolders on a Mac first and then sync them with iCloud to your iOS devices. Now you can do this directly on iOS and iPadOS. You can create a folder anywhere, and you can also use drag and drop both on the iPad and on the iPhone to move a folder into another folder. I've been doing this for years. I have a lot of, just to give an example, I've just created a folder for my iOS and iPadOS review. And inside that folder, I have a subfolder called sessions, where I've been taking notes about WWDC sessions. I have a personal folder that contains like 10 subfolders for travel, health, concerts, all kinds of different areas of my personal stuff. So I'm super happy to see that you can now manage nested folders and create them on iOS as well.
Yeah, it's a really nice feature, and you just, as you said, you just take your finger and drag and drop the notes between folders, which works really well. I've tried it, and it seems really solid. It's nice too that if you want to go crazy with the folders, you can nest them really to multiple levels. This is not just like a semi-flat 2-layer structure or anything. You can go 3, 4, 5 levels deep if you want.
Yeah, you can totally do that. And while I was, in fact, managing some of my folders last night, I noticed that there's a new very handy option in iOS 13 and iPadOS 13, which is you can now sort your notes on a per folder basis. So, for example, I want to have a folder where my notes are sorted by title, and I want to have another folder where my notes are sorted by modification date. And that's totally possible with the updated Notes app. This is a feature that I think a few months ago when I was testing Evernote, I mentioned I cannot believe that Evernote still does not have this option on iOS. Turns out that maybe Apple was listening too, because now you can sort your notes differently based on the folder that you're viewing, which is amazing because my writing folder, perhaps I want to have a specific sorting by title based on chapter numbers, but maybe my inbox I just want to sort by creation date or modification date. So I totally love this option.
Yeah, it's really nice. Before on iOS 12, if you wanted to sort, you could only sort all the notes by a particular criteria, and you had to go into the Settings app and then go to the Notes section and do it there. But this, I guess, when you open the folder, you just kind of pull down like you would to get the search field, and next to the search field is a button for sorting, right?
Yeah, that's how it works. You open a folder, swipe down, and you will see on the right side there's a new sort by button that you can tap, and you gain a bunch of options. On the left side, though, there's a new icon which is Grid View. What is Grid View, John?
So Grid View is really interesting. It's just what it sounds like. It takes the list of notes and converts it into a thumbnail grid of notes. So this is particularly handy, I've found, for things like images, drawings that you take with the Apple Pencil, or web pages, that kind of thing. But I was really pleasantly surprised to find, too, though, that the thumbnails are super readable, even if it's just a text note. There's a slider, a lot like you find in the Photos app, where you can move the slider to kind of adjust the size of the previews of your photos. Same thing in Notes, where you move that slider back and forth to create larger or smaller thumbnails. It's handy to have smaller ones on something like an iPhone, but an iPad, you have a little extra screen real estate. You can kind of pump that size up a little bit and get a better view of what you're looking at. And it works really well. It's not something that I think I'm going to use most of the time, but especially if I have a folder full of things like screenshots.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Or notes that I've taken with the Apple Pencil. I could definitely see using it for those kind of situations. How about you?
Yeah, I've been thinking of where I want to archive my iOS 13 screenshots at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to go with something like this, like have a new subfolder full of beta screenshots that I will display in Grid View. Because I'm not yet taking screenshots for the review. It's still too early, especially at least until beta 4 or 5. I don't feel comfortable taking screenshots that will be in the final story. And for that, I will be using files and Scriptable and IA Writer and the workflow that I mentioned a few episodes ago. But right now, I just want to make sure that I can have screenshots about like features or design details, things that I want to check upon later on. And I think I'm going to go with Notes because they just get lost in the Photos app, especially now that the Photos app puts a higher emphasis on actual photos instead of screenshots.
Right.
So I think I'm going to go with this new subfolder for beta screenshots, for things to check or, just things to keep in mind, and display that folder in Grid View.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by AstroPad Studio. AstroPad Studio turns your iPad into a completely customizable graphics tablet so you can combine the power of the Apple Pencil with your favorite Mac apps right on your iPad. The makers behind AstroPad understand that no two artists work alike. That's why they've packed AstroPad with opportunities to customize every aspect of your workflow with features like programmable gestures, custom pressure curves, and unlimited per app shortcuts. They literally designed AstroPad from the ground up for professional artists. They also guarantee low latency performance over Wi-Fi or a USB cable, so you can set up your workspace on the go. It's a high-performance tool for the most demanding creative work, and it's used by major animation studios and product design firms across the globe. So, if you're ready to take your creative workflow to the next level, you can start your free 30-day trial of AstroPad Studio today. Just visit astropad.com to get started. That's astropad.com. Go check it out. Our thanks to AstroPad Studio for the support of App Stories. Why don't we move on to sharing? Because I think sharing is the category that has me the most excited about anything we're going to talk about today, and particularly the folder sharing, because you and I have experimented with different apps when we're working on a joint project. Like most recently, we were using Notion when we were developing our other podcast, Dialogue, and some other projects that we had going on this spring. And Notion is just such a non-native experience that I think, despite all the functionality and power of that app, it's something that neither you nor I really want to continue with. And with shared folders now in Notes, there's a ton of features that you won't find in something like Notion in Notes. But I think it'll get the job done for probably 90% of the stuff that we do. The problem I had before with just sharing individual notes is that you would just end up with this long list of shared notes, and it was difficult sometimes to really know, well, wait, which ones of these did I share with Federico? Which ones of these did I share with Ryan? Which ones of these did I share with somebody else? And this way, we can just create a folder that's like John and Federico and share it and drop whatever we want to share with each other in that folder and not have to worry about, which note is associated with which person.
Yeah, this is great. I'm already thinking of ways that I can change how I share notes with other people, because right now what I've been doing is, before shared folders, I had let's say 50 shared notes, like individually shared notes.
Right.
And I would keep them all manually in a shared folder that I created. That folder was not actually shared because it was not possible with iOS 12. It just contained a collection of shared notes. Now, though, I'm thinking maybe I should clean up that folder because some of those notes are no longer necessary. And I should create like a folder for you, a folder for Ryan, another for Alex, another for Mike and Steven, maybe. Have all contained inside those folders because they actually show me the name of the participants. And then move all of those folders, if possible, into another folder. So I can have my shared folder that's just called shared, that contains actually shared folders.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think you can move a shared folder anywhere in the Notes app. So
yeah, I think you can too. I think that should work.
So that's probably going to be my approach, cleaning up all of my shared notes, which actually I wanted to mention this later, but it's even easier now in iOS 13 to find all of the notes that have been shared with you, thanks to the improved search functionalities. I guess I'm going to just jump around because it makes sense to cover this now.
Sure.
The search feature in the Notes app takes advantage of a new API in iOS 13 and iPadOS for developers, which is, remember how last year in the Photos app, you could search for like photos by date or by location or by people in them. And when you tapped on a search suggestion, it would put like a little token in the search field. And you could chain together multiple search parameters that would appear as these rectangular buttons in the search box. That feature is now an API for developers. Developers can now implement search functionalities that tokenize search suggestions and put them in a search field. This is basically standard UIKit stuff. So Apple is allowing developers to build the same search interface that they've been using in Photos. And in doing this, Apple has improved search UIs all across the system. So now you have search suggestions in files, for example, and you have search suggestions in notes. And in notes, you have four, I think, at least right now in beta 1, at least four default suggested searches. You can see locked notes, so notes that you protected with a password or Face ID, notes with attachments, notes with checklists, and finally notes that have been shared. So if you just tap on the shared notes suggestion, you can look across all of your configured accounts or just the current account, and you will find just with one tap all of the shared notes that you have. So even if you don't have a folder where you collect all of your shared notes like I've been doing, you can just use the new shared suggestions and find all of your shared notes like that. It's very nice.
That is very nice. So while we're on search, I ought to mention too that when you use the search function, you can search inside PDFs now too, if they're text-based ones, not ones that are images. But that I believe that's new.
I think that was possible before, but definitely Apple did mention it this year as part of.
They mentioned it on stage, I think, right?
Yeah, as part of, because I think they're now using the Vision APIs that allow developers to actually recognize text anywhere. I will be surprised if Apple doesn't actually implement images by the final release. It feels like it's totally something that can be done on iOS at the moment. And so I feel like, but I've tested it. It doesn't work in beta 1. You cannot search for text in images. I will be surprised if they do not bring it by the final release, because I mean, this is one of the features that Evernote has. And so it does seem to me like both images and PDF documents should be supported. That's something that I would actually use a lot. Anyway, back to sharing. We were talking about folders. Can you tell me, John, how can you actually share folders in Notes now in the new beta?
So to share a folder with another person so that it's a read-write privilege, so that you and I can both make changes to whatever's in that folder, there's a few ways you can do it. There's a 3-dot button up in the corner, and you can tap on that and then select Add People. And then it's very much like you've probably seen elsewhere in iOS when you're sharing something with another person. You can send it by iMessage, email, a bunch of different ways. There's also, you can swipe left on the folder to reveal some options, some buttons, and one of them is to share. That right now, that animation is a little buggy and isn't working super well. And then third, you can use the share extension. So there are 3 ways to do that. Add people is, I guess, the key phrase, though, because adding people will allow those people you've added to access the folder, add things to it, modify things in it. The other alternative is to just open the share sheet and tap on one of the apps to share a folder by iMessage or email or however you do it. But if you do it via the app, then it zips up the notes inside it and shares it as a read-only document.
Well, that's a bunch of options.
Yeah, it's a lot of ways to do it, and it's just kind of a new thing, a new metaphor, I guess, in a way, a difference between sharing with people and sharing via apps. It just works a little differently between the two.
Yeah, I guess I'm just gonna go with because I'm so used to the Add People UI. I feel like it's more clear, and maybe it's because I'm not quite used to the share sheet UI in iOS 13 yet with the people suggestions, mostly filled with iMessage shortcuts right now.
Right.
Another option that you have in the new Notes app is to share a note with somebody else, but make it read only, so that the other person cannot make changes to the note. This is great for a variety of reasons. Personally speaking, I have a few notes that I share with my mom, for example, for like instructions on how she can do things on her iPhone. And especially now that I just bought her, I was in America for WWDC and I came back with an iPhone XR for my mom as a surprise. She was very happy, but she doesn't really know how to use an iPhone without a home button. So I've been making a few notes with like basic instructions. It takes her a while to get used to new things on her phone. So I've been sharing these little manuals with her. And also, I have a few notes that I share with the Mac Stories team for reference They contain things like shortcuts or explanations on how certain workflows work in practice. And I think it'll be convenient if I can make those notes read-only so that not even accidentally other people cannot make changes to a note. So I think this is another feature that I'll be using a lot. But I gotta go in, take a look at all my notes and change the permissions or maybe recreate them. Now there's also a few notable additions in the editing department of notes. This is not something that I use, but I know a lot of people that do use checklists in notes. I just prefer to use reminders, I guess. But I suppose that quite a lot of people are using checklists in notes because they're using notes as a to-do app. So sort of to cater to those people, Apple made it possible to reorder your checklists with drag and drop. And it's really nicely done in that even on an iPhone or on an iPad, you can just pick up a checklist item and you can move it up and down in a checklist, and you will see a little horizontal line that tells you where the new position in the checklist will be. And if you're using an iPhone, you will also feel a subtle haptic tap to tell you when a checklist is moving, checklist item is moving across the list. I think it's really nicely done, even though I don't use it.
Yeah, same here. I don't use checklists very often, but it's implemented very well. Another thing worth mentioning, I guess, are the new drawing tools, because these are system-wide, and I guess I run into these most often when I'm taking screenshots, and the screenshot pops up onto the screen with the pencil and marker and eraser and all the other tools. They have been redesigned, so they look different, and they work a little differently. I haven't used them a lot yet, but they're the same drawing tools that are available in Notes as well.
One of my favorite changes is you can now create subheadings in Notes. I haven't seen anyone make a big deal out of this. It's a huge deal for me because I love to outline story ideas or, again, little documentation like manuals in Notes. And previously you could only have a title or a heading, but there wasn't anything to have like a subheading if you want to have multiple subsections. And now that is possible. So now you can create subheadings with the formatting menu, or if you're using an external keyboard, you can just hit Command Option J, and you will have a subheading, which is a smaller, kind of boldish font that separates subsections from the main section. So super small detail, but it definitely does help in especially if you have a long note and you want to have multiple sections. Now you can do subheadings, which is very nice. And also, I want to call out how you can finally, also a proper API for developers that Apple is also using now in iOS 13. You can save tweets from Twitter clients, any twitter.com link, using the share sheet to Notes, and they will actually show you the tweets preview in the Notes app on iOS. It used to be that for some reason, the ways that Apple was dealing with rich links from Twitter was different between macOS and iOS. And now with Catalina and iOS 13 and iPadOS, they have unified how they deal with rich links. There's a new API in iOS 13 that developers can use. And it appears that Apple is using it as well because the results are consistent everywhere. And you can now see tweets. You can see the author, you can see the text, you can see the image attachments in the Notes app. As someone who runs a variety of shows where people ask us questions, and I want to be able to save those questions in a note, this is just perfect because I see a rich preview of the tweets that somebody asked me, and especially if you use the large images option of a note, it comes really in handy. And the large images option for those who don't know, in Notes you can choose to view all attachments to a note, so images, links, or PDF documents, either as big attachments inside of a note or as little small thumbnails. And this is done by long pressing on an attachment and choosing small images or large images. And if you use large images, the rich links will be bigger. So that's very nice. Yeah,
this gets a big finally, because it was always frustrating to work on a note from both macOS and iOS and have the links look different depending on where I made the note. And even better yet, the fact that third parties can adopt this for their own apps. I really hope we see this in a lot of other note-taking apps and similar, research storage type of apps. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Direct Mail, an easy-to-use email marketing app designed exclusively for the Mac to help you create and send great-looking email newsletters. Email marketing is still an incredibly cost-effective way to reach your customers and to grow your business. And for the past 15 years, Mac users around the world have trusted the Direct Mail app to handle all of their email marketing needs. It's designed just for the Mac, which means it's fast, easy to use, and it works great with the other apps and services you already use. With Direct Mail, you can quickly and easily compose high-quality emails that look great on mobile and desktop. Save time by integrating with over 1,000 other apps and services on your Mac and the web, and have email campaigns sent automatically without lifting a finger. There's a whole bunch of other features too. They have real human live chat customer support available to answer your questions too. And Direct Mail is the #1 top-rated email marketing app for the Mac with 5-star reviews on the App Store, GetApp, and elsewhere. Direct Mail is trusted by small businesses, nonprofits, schools, and Fortune 500 companies alike, and the app is free to download to get started. Listeners of this show can save 10% off all of Direct Mail's full-feature pricing plans. Head over to directmailmac.com/appstories to check it out. Again, that URL is directmailmac.com/appstories to get 10% off when you opt for a full feature plan. Our thanks to Direct Mail for their support of App Stories.
What else is new in Notes? I guess there's a few changes to the extension, maybe?
Yeah, there's just a couple of small things. Before, the only way to really pin a note, I think, was by swiping on it and hitting the pin button. But now that's part of the Share extension as well, in that long list that we talked about that appears where action extensions used to be in the Share sheet. And in addition to that, there's a move to folder action in the Share sheet too.
That's very nice. And the whole extension is much, much bigger than before.
Yes.
Especially on iPad, it fully takes over the screen and it shows you all of your notes and all of your folders. It feels like it's easier to use than before. I wanted to mention something that I've been doing in Notes while preparing for my iOS 13 review. I am now in the process of taking notes, collecting little details and tidbits that I find all over the internet, from YouTube videos, from Reddit, from other websites, about features and design details or problems that people are pointing out. And initially, all of these notes were just randomly thrown into a single iOS 13 tidbits note that I had. But yesterday, I went through the process of reorganizing the entire note, and I split up all of those lines of text into features or apps. So I ended up creating like 30 notes for apps and stuff like design or iPad or shortcuts, all of the basic sections that will be in some form or another in my review. And browsing 30 notes is okay, but I wanted to have an easier way to access them. So I built a table of contents in Apple Notes. And you may wonder, how did you actually do this? Because unlike Bear and other note-taking apps, there is no native table of contents feature in Notes to reference another note and tap on it so you can navigate to that note.
Right.
And maybe you're thinking, oh, he actually shared a note, each note with himself, so that he has iCloud.com links for every note, and he taps on them and navigates to those notes. And that's close enough, but it's not what I did.
That's what I thought you had done
Nope.
at first when I heard about
Nope.
this.
So turns out that a few months ago, Shortcuts has a find note action. And find note, which is improving in iOS 13 with the option of finding notes contained in specific folders. This was not possible before. Allows you to inspect the contents of a note as the iOS system sees it behind the scenes. So I put together a simple shortcut that I cannot share right now because I don't have a sharing feature in shortcuts. I hope that's not a bad sign. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. There's a few changes to shortcuts sharing in iOS 13, so
Right.
that's probably gonna be another episode. So there's gonna be an image, I guess, John, in the show notes somewhere to show people
Okay.
how they can actually replicate this shortcut. So if you connect Find Notes with View Content Graph, you can view the actual note object that the operating system deals with. And so if you search for a note, in this case, let's say that I'm in my iOS 13 folder and I'm searching for a note called iPad. The content graph preview comes up. Then if you tap on the note object, you will see it looks like XML. It looks like raw syntax. And
Right.
that is the object that the operating system deals with for an individual note. But you will see that there's an identifier parameter. That identifier contains a link that begins with mobile notes : / something. That is the URL scheme to open an individual Apple Note locally without sharing it with yourself. This is the only way to obtain these URL schemes. There is no other way to generate them because the alphanumeric ID of a note is completely hidden from the system. There is no way in shortcuts to extract this information. So what I did is for each note that I created in my iOS 13 research folder, I ran this shortcut, I copied the link, and I used another shortcut to create a rich text hyperlink. This shortcut is available in the Mac Stories Shortcuts archive. It's called, I believe, Create Hyperlink. And once I had a hyperlink to each note, I just pasted it in my table of contents. And you will also see there's going to be also in the show notes the pictures showing you final results of what my table of contents look like. It is a single note that contains a bunch of links. And when I tap those links, they take me to a specific note in Apple Notes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very nice.
That's fantastic.
Navigation is instant. It takes a while to set up because, again, you got to repeat that process manually. There is no
Sure.
way to obtain the URL scheme automatically with another shortcut. But I mean, it took me about 10 minutes to have this entire setup going. And you can see I have a section, for example, that says design, and there's a bullet list inside. So it's very nice to have a nice looking table of contents that allows me to jump around between different chapters. I think this will save me a lot of time when searching for notes. And yeah, I mean, I guess it works really nicely. And I'm going to give you an extra tip.
All right.
There is a new feature in iOS 13. I believe it's called intelligent text selection.
Okay.
What it is so when you're viewing the content graph, when I mentioned you see that URL scheme, mobile notes : /
Sure.
in previous version of iOS, you had to select things like a link manually by selecting the text and then adjusting the text selection. In iOS
Right.
13, the system lets you double tap to automatically select items it recognizes. Try this on a link, try this on a person's name, try this on a street address. Just double tap and the entire thing will be selected for you.
That is fantastic, especially with URLs.
Yes, because I believe it uses the existing data detectors, so phone numbers,
Right.
links, addresses, people names. Just double tap them. Works on the iPhone, works on the iPad, and they will be selected, so you can copy them instantly without having to adjust the selection. This should really be a native feature, by the way. Like, you should totally be able to just reference a note and automatically create a link, just like it works in Bear. So that's one of the features
Right.
that I hope in the future Apple considers. Especially now that you have subfolders and multiple layers of navigation, it would be really convenient to be able to reference a note and have it become a link. Or maybe it should just be like an intelligent thing where you don't have to use any specific syntax. When you type a name of a note, it just becomes a link on its own because it knows that that's also a note that exists in the app. So maybe that should be a feature.
Yeah, it should be a feature. I think that's a great shortcut. I'm going to use that myself. And the building blocks sound like they're there with this new URL. So No reason why Apple couldn't do it at some point in the future.
Yeah, I guess.
All right, Federico, I think that is a great place to stop for today. We have so many more apps to talk about, but we also have all summer long, so we'll do that. I want to give everybody a short plug for our other show, Dialogue, which is an interview podcast. It's seasonal, it's weekly during the season, and we've got musician Frank Turner coming up next week. So go check it out at dialoguepodcast.net. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today's show, Astropad Studio and Direct Mail. Of course, you can always find me and Federico over at macstories.net, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci, that's Viticci, and I'm at John Voorhees, JohnVoorhees. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.